Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. I have 3 questions. We may not get to all of them, so I'll take a second round. The first 2 have to do with the Competition Act. And the first of the 2 questions is whether the wage fixing prohibitions will have a bearing on non-compete agreements and non-compete deals that are reached by employees who leave certain companies, where, of course, their skills are in rare supply and where they have some special knowledge of that company's operations. The second question is on is more general. It's on this broader issue of whether the Competition Act is general purpose, or whether it and is suitable for all kinds of industries, including new industries that have cropped up in recent years, and whether it is fit for purpose for these new businesses. And Ms. Miller, I think, gave the answer that in general that's the case, and that's the approach that the department is taking. But I do notice that you are proposing some modernization of language, particularly to deal with network effects, which are, of course, very important in a digital economy, and potential sources of market power abuse. Can you say a little bit about the way in which change in language will, in fact, help you identify market power abuse and therefore improve the effectiveness of the Competition Act? Why don't I pause there, Chair, and if I have time, I'll go to the third question.
Well, thank you very much for the question. And Madam Chair, I'm going to invite my colleague, Ian Disend, to join me for the first answer, as he is one of our foremost technical experts on the Act and would be pleased to respond to the first half of the question.
Thank you very much for the question. On the question of non-competes, the provision is phrased such that it only applies between employers. So if the clause were to purport, for example, to limit any future salary that the departed employee might pay to an employee of their own, then it would potentially apply. But in terms of the substance of merely competing against the former employer, that would be covered by a different provision of the Act, not one that's being substantively amended as part of this package. But anything that's specifically between employer and employee, for example, is not part of this amendment.
And with respect to the second part of your question about the extent to which this activity will help the Act remain fit for purpose, the fact that it accommodates new industries while still remaining in the context of a law of general application, I think probably the best answer to that question is that in spite of what I said about laws of general application, which are the foundation for how we regulate the economy, that we give that certainty and predictability to businesses, consumers, anyone else who's participating in the economy or the marketplace, that doesn't release us from the obligation of making sure that we are looking at different behaviors that are present in the marketplace, that we make sure there are, for example, no loopholes or no new practices that might unintentionally fall outside the scope of the Act. And so just to give you one, I would say, kind of illustrative example here, one of the provisions you'll have noticed relates to the concept of drip pricing, which is basically when you don't know as a consumer the final price that you will pay because you think you are paying an advertised price, and then a company adds on different fees and charges that are within its control, such that you've kind of invested yourself in the transaction by the time you come to complete it, and you therefore tend to go through with it. Well, that's a practice that is obviously greatly enabled by the digital sphere, because it's very easy to present you with successive screens of information and then a final price and that very tempting kind of buy now button. So I would say that that's one example. Will it apply across across different types of industries that do business online? Absolutely. Is it a practice that is definitely made much easier and therefore needs to be addressed in the digital sphere? That is also true. But that's kind of how the two abilities of the Act to work together in that way would function in this case.
Senator Wu, we'll come back on second round then. Or did you have a follow-up right there?
Well, but on network effects, I think it gets to the question of what is the purpose of the act, because a network effect could be beneficial for consumers, right? Some would argue. And I'm not sure how you are interpreting network effects. Network effects could be very anti-competitive, but they could be beneficial for consumers if they lower prices and increase welfare and so on. So I'm just trying to, and I know this is not tackled in the amendments, and that's one of the questions Senator Whetstone has rightly said we need to debate some more. But are you nudging to a conclusion? Are you nudging to a way of thinking about network effects that you need to tell us maybe and help us understand?
Certainly, and Madam Chair, I'll answer part of this, and I will also call on my colleague Mr. Disend to answer it as well. Network effects are certainly, there is some language in the amendments that speaks to that, and I'll call on Mr. Disend to speak to that. But you know, I think to me, what your question points to is the fact that you do have to kind of consider all of these elements in their context, particularly around things like if you think about some of the dominant digital platforms, there can be benefits to users of some of the some of the services that they have chosen to employ. It's the anti-competitive and the harmful practices that the act is intended to address, no matter what industry they would be in. So I'll just maybe suggest that Mr. Disend also contribute to this answer.
Certainly, and network effects are named as part of the amendments. As Ms. Miller noted, they are a consideration for the Competition Tribunal. So the Act doesn't purport to take a position on what they mean for competition, merely that it is something for the tribunal to take notice of when evaluating whether or not competition has been harmed under any one of the three provisions where they're named.
Okay, thank you very much.